All right, good evening and welcome to the September 25th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Franzen. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And we will now put our mission statement up on the screen and would invite you to take a moment to read our mission statement. Okay. Beginning tonight, we'll have our discussion items, starting with our board committee updates. And first will be the facilities committee.
Well, the minutes are there. They're actually really thorough. So I don't know that there's really anything that I need to expand upon. I think exciting to see that substantial completion of the new high school is set for November 15th. The Ames Center planning update, phase 1 should be nearing, hopefully this week, nearing its completion. And then we will be able to get some students in there in the upcoming future. But then phase 2 will start potentially this spring, kind of depending on as they come back with their bids, and funding is PEPAL and SAVE, because as you all think about the GEO bond, they now have to be done in November. So there's some constraints on school financial planning in terms of going out for a referendum. Not saying that we would, but that's just the reality of things. Otherwise, I think everything else is really laid out well. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Next is policy committee.
Yes, we met. What was the date? The 14th. We met on the 14th and the minutes are pretty accurate. We'll talk about each of the items when we move to discussion.
Thank you. And mental health committee met on September 15th. We reviewed a draft of the mental health plan, which was really exciting to see that coming together. I know that a lot of work has gone into that from staff. It has sections on everything from mental health screening, the process for community providers coming into the schools to provide services, crisis protocols, suicidality, professional development for staff, therapeutic classrooms, and even information on mental health supports for staff. So it's quite comprehensive, and the draft of that plan is available on the agenda from that meeting if anyone is interested in looking at it. Any questions for mental health committee? Okay, we will go on to our policies for discussion.
So I'll just update, or I'll just highlight the ones that have some substantive change or update. The policy 502.10, use of motor vehicles, takes a line out of our policy that made it a little bit more limiting to get a permit than what the state law required. The 605.3 is updated based on IASB's updated model related to new legislation around objections to instructional materials that outlines those policies and procedures. And a 507.2, the stock opioid antagonist medication supply. That one is a new policy as well that has, I tried to discuss last week, but actually was moved off and I hadn't realized it. But it was looked at by legal, and so the final draft is there for discussion. I think that's everything that had a change or was new.
Thank you. Questions on the policies for discussion? Okay, then we will turn it over to Chris for our financial reports for June and August.
All right, Dan, if you could go to the first financial page. So we did finish the fiscal year June 30th. As you know, we're on a modified basis of accrual accounting, which means we hold our books open until August 31st. With 100% of the year gone, we received 102% of the revised revenues, whilst expending 98.6% of the revised general fund expenditures. Sorry. Yeah, if you could go to the first financial page, with all the numbers on it. One more. There we go. So you can see the total revenues were at 102% of the revised. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that we spent 98.6% of our general fund expenditures, what we were estimating. The district's ending fund balance was 15.2 million, of which 13.7 is unreserved and undesignated. And if Dan scrolls down just a little bit, you'll see everything that is reserved. So that almost $1.5 million are grants that are reserved for those purposes only and would be considered reserved spending authority that we'll talk about. All the statutory control lines were within the certified budget. And the unspent balance did increase from 4.7 million to 7.3 million, represents 10.4. I do want to point out that when you take out those reserved balances, that it brings the unobligated UAB, which is what the DE looks at, to 5.9 million or 8.3%. So we're still within that that range that we're aiming to. We're no longer in a position where the DE is sending us what I used to call nasty grams, that we were going to go negative, but we're still on the low side compared to other school districts. Dan, if you'll go to the next page that looks kind of like this, skip this one and go to the next one. Then in total, if you go up just a little bit more, you'll see that we received 105.3% of our total revised revenues while expending 95.2% of the estimated. I will say that on both the general fund and the revenue or the total budget, one of the contributors to the fund balance going up, the unspent balance going up, was how high the interest rates have been. If you remember, during COVID, the interest rates went down to zero and we were getting nothing. And then to fight inflation, they've been raising, the feds have been raising the interest rates, and I expect those will start coming down now as inflation's. But, you know, when I did this budget originally, I estimated about $131,000 of interest, and we received 2.2 million. If we had just been able to have those rates the whole time we had all those bond monies, that would have been fantastic. But you can't expect those to be sustainable. So it's not something that we can say, gee, we got in the general fund $700,000 of revenue, let's go out and put it on recurring costs, because we can't guarantee that's going to continue. Just like when almost immediately my interest, the interest went from like $300,000 a month down to $5,000 a month when they during COVID, when they reduced the rates to zero. And then the expenditures were not quite as close, but that's mainly because construction, construction crosses that fiscal year, and I have to try to have enough budget there. And so I had estimated that we'd spend 21.3 million and we spent 18 million. The ending fund balance is down to 44 million because we are getting those capital funds expended. Dan, if you'll go to the next page. I do want to show you, if you look at that capital projects just a little bit more. You look at that capital project a little bit more. Little bit. Go down to where you can see the fund balance. That column there where it has the ending fund balance of $717, that's our GO bonds. So other than we're continuing to do a little bit of interest on those while we're holding the retainage. The GO bonds have spent, and you'll notice there that for the facilities expenditures, we spent almost the same amount out of save as we did out of the GO bonds this year for the high school. And if you can, there's a page called cash and investments. Keep going one. Yeah, this one. This page, if you'll take a look at it, this is what I'm actually legally required to provide you as far as the code, because the code was written long before there was any kind of accounting systems, and gapping. I will say that don't pay attention to these because the amount of cash that we have is no way indicative of what our fund balance is at year end. All of the teachers' July and August payrolls are accrued back to June, so our fund balance is much less than our cash. But on the other hand, we have a whole bunch of tuition that comes in July and August because we can't bill, especially for special ed tuition, until July 15th. I think that is about it for June.
Chris, why did our student activities, that was the percent of the certified budget was 239.8. It's just below the interest on the general.
If you can, the general fund, you mean?
Yeah, one on the, if you go on the total budget financial, it was the second one you went to. So keep
Okay.
going up.
Well,
I just wondered why student activity.
yeah. Okay. So
Hard to predict.
part of it is
That
just
revenue?
catching up. If
It's down on the,
okay, well, there's two different things. If you look at the general fund, it's way under. And one of the reasons, and I've been trying, it's just because the budgets lag, we changed how we classified a lot of the textbook and fees, and they reclassified from a 1700 source code to a 1900. That's why the revenue in the general fund is different. On the revenue and the expenditures as far as the total budget, it's because all of that fundraising that had been outsourced to the Booster Club is now running through our books. And so we have a lot of camps and everything now running through our books, and that's creating revenues for our student activity
gotcha.
funds. If you go one more page, Dan, nope, the other way.
Other way, yeah.
You can see there that we received $970,000 in the student activity fund while expending just about that same amount.
Okay.
So that's the main reason.
So they brought in more revenue than you had anticipated because of the new way of.
Right,
all of the
because
fundraising then.
we
Gotcha.
brought back in-house all those things that should have been going through our books that had been going through the
Okay.
Booster Club.
Thank you.
And I think that's it for June, unless you have any questions. District continues to be in a very strong financial position. In August, I didn't do it July because there's not much happens actually in July. Everything that happens in July ends up in June. So I did in August. For the most part, nothing changed from the budget that you certified. Yep, stop right there. Go back down a little bit so you can see all this. Okay. When I got the preliminary budget documents back from the Department of Management, I quickly looked at them, saw that our tax rate was decreasing by less than 1/1000 of a cent, and said, oh, okay, nothing changed. Everything's fine, and stored it away until I could get past the year end for June 30th. And I started looking at, when I was putting this together, started looking through the aid and levy to see what had caused our tax rate to go down 1/1000 of a cent. I noticed that our state foundation aid had been decreased by $229,000, and I had a little bit of a heart stoppage. And so I went back and looked through every section of the aid and levy, and they had added a section that was not in the original aid and levy worksheet for some legislation that evidently passed at the end of the session that is reimbursing all the local governments for the first $150,000 of valuation for commercial, industrial, and railroad valuation, as if the residential rollback was applied to them. And because the school district through the school aid formula was always made whole for that, if they hadn't reduced our state aid by that amount, we would have double dipped. So the way that I read this, and I conferred with a couple other business managers, is they took it off of one state source and they're giving us a different one to replace it. So, and then there was a slight adjustment to the utility replacement credit that reduced the property taxes by $587. So that's what caused our tax rate to go down. They continue to hit the AEAs pretty hard. And so Heartland's portion of the budget cut this year was $198,000. That was a fairly significant decrease for them. while that's just a flow through in our budget and doesn't directly impact our financials, it could impact the services that we're going to receive from the AEA.
How many years in a row have we seen that? Because I feel like that has been.
There's been a grandfathered cut since before I came to Ames in 2015, but they did a much more significant cut this year.
Do you know why? I mean, those are necessary services in our school districts.
I don't think I want to express an opinion on the politics involved. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but things are moving along real quick. Good.
All right, thank you, Chris. And we don't have any public comments on our discussion items. So I will go ahead and open our public forum and I will read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And we have Grant Olson. You can come right up to the microphone here.
Hi, my name is Grant Olson, and I live at 3812 Ontario Street. I have an older child in the high school, and my younger child is at Sawyer. And I'd just like to talk briefly about one of the district's transportation policies that at the beginning of the year, families are deciding how their child will get to and from school. And so the school district has a threshold, and if you live further than that threshold, then the busing is free. And if you live closer than the threshold, then the family is sent a bill. And every family is going to sit down, and if you live closer than the threshold, you're going to have a physical cost, a visible cost, a bill from the school district, or you'll have a much less visible cost. Oh, I can just jump in my vehicle and take my child to and from school. And so I'd like you to just ponder how many people are filling up the pickup and drop off lines at school because of this visible cost from the school district. And while it's probably never been measured, I can only imagine that if you were to measure air quality throughout the day at a particular school drop off line, air quality is probably worse at pickup in the afternoon. So as you're making budget decisions in the coming months, just keep in mind, what are the consequences of that transportation busing policy? Do we have a visible cost and making it just easier for people to go with the less visible cost? I will have to deal with the effects of climate change much less than my children's generation will. They'll have to deal with all the decisions made up to this point and the decisions that my generation makes for the next few years. So thank you.
Thank you, Grant. I will check our Zoom sign up. We don't have anyone signed up to speak on Zoom. So I will go ahead and close our public forum, and our next item will be our consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, second by Beerbaum. Superintendent Lawson, gifts to the district.
Yes, thank you. The superintendent's office received the completed form for and recommends acceptance of the following gifts: $5,000 cash from the Burke Family Foundation for the benefit of the Hope Pantry for winter clothing, the Tumble family, books valued at $300 for the benefit of Meeker Elementary Media Center, Arthur Palm, gifted signal generator and digital oscilloscope valued at $280 for the benefit of Ames High School. And the class of 1973 gifted $250 cash for the benefit of Ames High School as well. And those are this evening's gifts to the district.
Thank you. It was moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Moving on to our action items, we'll begin with our policies for action.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Winfrey, seconded by Franzen. Discussion?
I'd like to speak to policy 12507.3, student disclosure of identity. The law on which this policy is based, Iowa State Senate File 496, is, in my opinion, an unjust piece of legislation that maliciously and unfairly targets the LGBTQ community and its young people in particular. That we as a school district and as a board are being forced to adopt a policy that undermines our commitment to student confidentiality and care is, again, in my opinion, a travesty and an embarrassment to me personally. I want our students and the LGBTQ community to know that this policy is being driven by the legislature. It has not been initiated by the board or by our ideology. As elected officials to this board, I feel it's important to say to our students that we've got your backs and we will continue to empower you to reach your full personal and educational potential. That's our ongoing promise to you.
Thank you, Brett. Are there any other comments on the policies for action?
I'll say thank you for saying that, Brett. I appreciate it. And we got to pass the policies we have to stay compliant, but we don't have to like it.
Yep.
And I think that's why the first sentence that Kelly had suggested in this policy, which I really appreciated, is this is because we are committed to maintaining compliance with state and federal law. That's why we're doing this.
Yep. Okay, it was moved by Winfrey, seconded by Franzen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And it's a lot of policies. Okay. That was, I'm sorry. Then we have our request for modified allowable growth and supplemental aid for special education.
I move to approve the request for modified allowable growth and supplemental aid for the special education deficit for the 2022-23 fiscal year.
Second.
Moved by Linkaitis, seconded by Becker. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Request to SBRC for modified allowable growth, limited English proficiency, allowable excess costs.
I move to approve the request to the School Budget Review Committee for modified allowable growth for limited English proficiency allowable costs in the amount of $580,253.51.
Second.
Moved by Linkaitis, seconded by Winfrey. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. New Ames High School change orders.
I move the board approve the change orders to the new Ames High School construction project as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. New Ames High School final acceptance and completion of work for bid packages 04-1 and 07-1.
I move the board approve the final acceptance of the work for bid packages 04-1 masonry by Midwest Masonry Incorporated and 7-1 roofing and sheet metal by Northern Cedar Service Corporation Incorporated.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. We will move on to our student representative board and staff items, and we'll begin this evening with our student representatives. Nothing to share this evening? Okay, no problem. Items from the board. I don't have any requests for staff this evening. Are there any other items from the board? And items from the superintendent?
Just like our students, I have nothing.
Okay. Then we'll take a quick look at our board planning calendar. Our next regular meeting will be on October 9th at 5:30 p.m. And we encourage everyone to attend the Ames High Homecoming Parade this evening at 6:30. Any comments on the board planning calendar?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Winfrey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0.